A herd of goats on loan from Langston University is making quick work of a difficult job, clearing the weeds and brush, choking a stormwater drainage ditch.
This is probably one of the most sustainable and eco-friendly methods that you can come up with.
It's very difficult for humans to stomp around with a chainsaw clearing the brush and weeds off those areas. So the goats are very agile and they can eat the brush and weeds off and clear those areas up.
This pilot project is to test whether goats can easily, efficiently, and more cost-effectively clear unwanted vegetation from urban stormwater runoff channels.
A typical employee is going to work that 8 to 5 schedule Monday through Friday, but the goats work around the clock and on weekends and are a lot cheaper in terms of labor.
Cody Wittenberg is Stillwater's stormwater manager. He says keeping vegetation from clogging channels is a constant challenge. That's because it's healthier for drainage ditches to have some vegetation to keep their banks from eroding, but not so much that it impedes water flow.
Well, vegetation, as a function of just nature, grows up and it can decrease the capacity of the channel for water flows to get in and out of the city, and also it can just take up some of the storage capacity that we have in the channel. Whenever you deal with floodplains or any sort of urban drainage system, you want to make sure that there's a balance between the environmental function of having vegetation and such and maintaining a urban ecosystem, if you will, but also that we don't pose any threats to the citizens for having an unmaintained channel which results in any sort of flooding or property damage.
What's this costing the city to put the goats on patrol as opposed to spraying herbicides or getting some machinery down there?
At this time, Langston's allowed us to use the goats for free and has just worked with us to support this project as a pilot project. So the only real expense that we've been out so far is just the amount of staff time it takes to make sure and double check that the goats are where they're supposed to be and taking care of business appropriately.
Wittenberg says he was unsure how those living near the pilot project would react, but was pleased to discover how quickly people embraced the goats. Gail Harris brought her grandkids out to watch the goats at work.
We were real happy to hear about it, and we wanted to come over and clean our ditch too. We wondered if we would be able to, if they'd make a lot of noise, but we haven't heard them at all. And we only live a block from here, so.
It only took about a week for the goats to transform the drainage ditch from this to this. Steve Hart is with Langston University's Goat Research Program. He says goats provide an eco-friendly way to clear brush and weeds from all sorts of places.
I think as basically it becomes more expensive to use herbicides and more restrictions on them, people will look more to using goats. There are some government areas that have some real weed and brush problems, and they have a lot more restrictions on the use of herbicides. And we've been consulted by several of them about the use of goats for controlling their brush and weeds.
He also expects more ranchers to turn to goats to clear and improve cattle pastures.
The goats then actually create more grass for the cattle as they take down the brush and the broadleaf weeds. There's a weed called Cerisa lespedeza that cattle farmers hate. It's like ice cream to a goat.
Hart says goats have a passion for another problematic weed as well.
Goats love poison ivy. After the first year, you won't see any poison ivy because the goats will consume it all. The only thing is you've got to make sure you don't kiss your goats while they're eating poison ivy.
That could give you a nasty rash, but poison ivy doesn't affect goats. And it doesn't take many goats to clear pasture land.
It depends on how much brush you have. Probably 2 goats per solid acre of brush and weeds is a good place to start.
Near Poto, the Kerr Center for Sustainable Agriculture is testing flexible electrified fencing to keep goats from escaping pastures they're supposed to clear. The center's David Rayage encourages ranchers to use goats instead of chemicals to improve cattle pastures.
For producers who are trying to avoid or reduce their reliance on herbicides to control weeds and brush in pastures, that's a niche for a goat. So a goat can fulfill that or help manage that part of an operation. We can run them in conjunction with beef cattle and what's called multi-species grazing, and we're getting ready to do that on this ranch.
In the past, ranchers were reluctant to commingle cattle and goats, but Hart says it's not a problem.
They're very compatible because the goats prefer to eat brush, first of all, and many of your broadleaf weeds, whereas cattle would prefer, of course, grass, first of all.
So whether it's to clear urban stormwater drainage ditches or clean up weeds and brush in rural cattle pastures, goats provide a low-cost, eco-friendly alternative to herbicides or doing the job by hand.